So a little help with the Minerals and Rocks lab. So once again, there's lots of stuff for you to look at in this week's module. So certainly the information that was presented to you in the lecture portion is helpful, but in order to do this lab quickly and to get some accurate answers, I'm going to suggest you look at these files here, mostly because the imagery there is much better. And so of course, doing this online, we're showing you pictures of rocks. And so you want to look at the pictures in these, either the PowerPoint or the PDF. The PDF's a little smaller. This is pretty huge. So you want to look at the imagery, and the imagery will say, here's a bunch of pictures of Felsic Composition rocks. And so you want to maybe have that open while you're kind of going back and forth. And so of course, you're watching the video that helps you with getting through the lab. There's more information, of course, in this page before you start the lab. You can go to the geology.com site and look at more pictures to get you kind of familiar with textures and compositions. Or you can look at, class size and things like that. So you can certainly look through there. But once you get to the lab itself, we're going to preview it a little bit here for you. You want to look at, like I said, having this kind of PowerPoint or the PDF open, because this is kind of how the lab is going to go. We're going to ask you some questions about igneous rocks, then sedimentary rocks, and then metamorphic rocks. Now, read the questions carefully and think about what it's telling you. So, you know the igneous rocks. What do we use to identify them? Texture and composition. So, we're already giving you some hints here. One is volcanic rock. What does that mean? You should know that volcanic rocks are igneous rocks that cooled on the surface of the earth. That means they have a small or a finely crystalline texture. Not big ones, not big crystals, right? And intermediate. So I'm not looking for the darkest thing. I'm not looking for the lightest thing. I'm looking for something that's kind of gray. And so what you could do, of course, is you could jump over to your PowerPoint here, and you scroll down through till you get to the igneous rocks. And, as you look through here are fine grain. These are volcanic rocks. Okay, well, that's great. And here's some porphyritic. We don't care because that's not what the question says. And we keep going. I want compositions, darn it. So we keep going. And here's felsic. So this is what the felsic one should look like. And then compare it to what you see in the image. And those look pretty light. So maybe we want some intermediate ones. So coarse intermediate, this is kind of this gray version. And so I'm liking B for the answer. And then it says name it. And you're like, crap, how do I know the names? So this is how it's consistently going to go through at least the igneous for sure. Look at the images to kind of figure out the composition. Then you're going to come all the way down to this slide or this page, and if you're doing the PowerPoint, this is how we're going to name it. So you were told it's intermediate, so it's got to be one of these names. And you were told it was volcanic, so that means fine-grained. So intermediate, you come down, come over, boom. It's got to be an andesite. So even without knowing what it looks like, because you're given that information, composition and texture, you can name all of these things. All right, so we can go back and do another one. Felsic plutonic. Remember, plutonic is big crystals. So it can't be this one, can't be this one. So we're looking at these two here. Felsic, what does that mean? If you're not sure, of course, go back. But it's the one that has the least amount of dark minerals. So between these two, this one has the least. Boom, I like that for the answer. And then you come back over here, you say, okay, it's felsic. It's got to be in this column. And it's coarse grain. Boom, it's a granite. So that's the process that you're going to go through when you are going through the igneous rock. So we're going to cruise through those. And you can name all those things and identify compositions. And eventually we'll get down to some sedimentary rocks. And so the terms here are clastic, made of pieces, right, or chemical or biochemical. But the same story holds true. Come back to your PowerPoint/PDF. And then, you're going to cruise through and look at the sedimentary rock stuff. And so here that is classic chemical. right? There's some images that show you the difference between some things. So you want to use those images to help you figure out what sample. But the naming convention is just like the igneous part. You're going to scroll all the way down, somewhere down here eventually. We're going to get to a chart, right? If I can ever find it. Where is it? Oh gosh, organic. So, and a lot of this built-in stuff is to quiz you, so as a practice thing. But here it is, 163, this slide or page. So what you want to do, oh, I lied. This is metamorphic. How did I get metamorphic? Where is my sedimentary one? So either I passed it up in the beginning, which I think I did. No fear. Must have been introduced in the beginning of the story. Let's go back to that story. Maybe that, not that one. There it is, I missed it. So sorry about that. So when you're doing sedimentary rocks, it's clastic up here, it's chemical down here. So is it gravel-sized pieces, sand-sized pieces, or mud-sized pieces? And then that's the name, right? So if we look over here, which one is clastic made of pieces? And then we want to know what would you call it. That's where this chart comes in. Okay, so if it's made of sand pieces, we call it a sandstone. Gravel, we call it a breccia or conglomerate, depending on the shapes. We can't see the pieces, but it's kind of layered really kind of finely. We can call it a siltstone or a shale. Oops, and don't forget there's some weird stuff here, but a lot of this stuff that either fizzes, that's how we know it's calcite. And so if it's made of shell fragments, it gets this name coquina. Limestone is a very typical name. So if you see an image where they're suggesting that the rock is fizzing or bubbling, it's made of calcite, but that's not the rock name. Remember, the rock name's over here. Or if it's quartz, which means it's super hard, can't scratch it with a nail. But look, same thing. Look at the pictures in the part about sedimentary rocks to help you. When you see a picture and it's asking for something, then go find it and match it up. And then that way you can kind of figure out what it is from the picture and then use the chart to name it. And then finally, of course, then you'll get into a couple metamorphic rock questions. So here's a picture showing a fizzing, right? So depending on which one it's asking about, but you know, this is a limestone because it's fizzing, it's reacting to acid. And of course, we're talking about sedimentary rocks. But I want to know something that's in a stream channel. So you want to think about what should the pieces look like that were moved by water? Are they angular or are they rounded, right? So these are some of the things that you'll kind of puzzle through. And then of course, if you know this, there's a person, we know size, it's clastic. Is it gravel? Is it sand-sized pieces? If it's gravel-sized pieces, is it rounded or angular? Right? We have a name for the rounded portion and a name for the angular portion. So make sure you check the chart to find the name. And then for metamorphic, we've already been there, but here's same thing. Imagery. Let's go back to, I already went there, but same thing. There's some images that we can look at for, I guess the chart was early in our SED stuff. There's a lot of sedimentary stuff apparently. So here's igneous stuff or metamorphic stuff. So you want to look at textures here to help you figure out what you're looking at. But once again, you're going to come to here and say, all right, what is it asking me about? Is it foliated or non-foliated? And then, you know, is it really well defined? You have to look at some of the imagery to determine. If it says pick out the non-foliated rock and you were looking for ones that doesn't have the layering. So you could pick it out, and then marble is calcite, which means it fizzes. So if there's an image that shows it's fizzing, then that must be a marble. And so you're going to play that same game, right? So regional, remember, means that pressure dominates. You learned that in lecture. And what does that mean? It means they're foliated. So they should be foliated. So there'd be some layering that you could see. But here's the key. It's got to be a granite that it started with. And so we know that granites typically form something like this and not these. What is this? Go back to the pictures, find out what it's called. But this is a foliated rock that has this parent rock that's a granite. Let me come over to my chart. here it is. So it's foliated, and what's my parent rock? Oh, granite. Oh, look at that. There's the name. Okay, so that's how you're going to play the game for the metamorphic, right? So you're going to come back here. Remember, contact means high heat, so no foliation here. And it's made of limestone. What's that called? Well, let's see. Look, here it is. This is what it used to be, so I know the name. And how do I identify this? It's calcite, it fizzes. Okay, so if you use these charts, those 3 charts, I think you can name them fairly easily, but don't just use the picture, but that's useful, of course, to be able to find the picture. Sometimes in the slides it tells you the name right there. But the information in the question is guiding you too, right? You should know what contact metamorphism means. No foliation. Of limestone means it fizzes. So no fizz, fizz. You know, it's got to be this one based on the information given there. And then the name, of course, comes from the chart. Okay, so hopefully that'll help you kind of get through. Once again, I know it is challenging because we're just showing you pretty pictures. You don't get to see them. You don't get to, hit them with hammers and, make them react with acid in person. But I think you can still do it if you use that PowerPoint/PDF and use it wisely. Okay, questions, concerns, comments, please contact me.